A little under a month ago, the Atlanta Falcons shocked a lot of people by drafting Texas running back Bijan Robinson with the 8th overall pick. And the sense of shock did not come from the fact that it was a reach, not by any means, but the sense of surprise came from the fact the Falcons really didn't need a running back, as the Falcons ranked 2nd in rushing yards per game, and they did it efficiently too, ranking 4th in yards per attempt. And these numbers were with a 5th-round rookie in Tyler Algier getting just over 1,000 rushing yards during his rookie season, with Cordell Patterson, who did see a decreased receiving role last season, but overall kept up the same rushing numbers. And hell, they even did it with an undrafted rookie in Caleb Huntley scoring just over 5 yards per carry. So why did the Falcons draft Bijan Robinson? I'm not here to criticize the pick. In fact, I'm here to praise the pick. We can all see the thumbnail. I love it. And that is because I believe that this pick sets Arthur Smith up in the best way to win some games and break the 7-10 mold he's been stuck in the last 2 seasons. And I'm not saying that this is a make or break year for Arthur Smith. I do not think that is the case. But this year could make Arthur Smith if it is very successful and they potentially win the division. Or it could break Arthur Smith's tenure if this season is flat out horrible for the Atlanta Falcons. And I akin this selection to when the Bengals got Jamar Chase. It may not have made the most sense from a very textbook team building side of things, but I think it makes complete sense because it has the highest upside. And considering the pass-heavy offense the Bengals were looking to run, it worked out beautifully. And considering the run-heavy offense that the Falcons run, I believe it will work out beautifully because Bijan Robinson is that type of prospect. And we saw how it worked out for Zach Taylor and the Cincinnati Bengals. Will it work out the same for Arthur Smith? We will find out. But I believe that the Bijan Robinson selection, from a pure 10,000-foot view, if you can get a top prospect at pick 8, that's wonderful. Now, if you can get a top prospect that fits exactly what you do on offense, I believe it is a match made in heaven for the rushing offense and what Arthur Smith is trying to do, and as the Falcons try to break through that 7-10 mold this upcoming season. Also, let's call it what it is. Skill position players are winning more games for teams than ever. We see the money being allocated to these players. I think it makes complete sense, but I do understand the criticisms. Sliding over to the Falcons' next draft pick, they would continue to address the rushing offense, as in the 2nd round they traded up to pick 38 to select Matthew Bergeron. Now, I do love this pick, as Bergeron is known for his rushing blocking ability, but he is expected to slide to that guard position and play across from Chris Lindstrom, who got a 5-year, $105 million contract extension, as he played 39 college games at tackle, 31 at left tackle, 8 at right tackle. And given that, the decision to move him over to guard was still a very easy one, considering Jake Matthews at left tackle and Caleb McGarry at right tackle will each be starting 3-year contract extensions this season. I also don't know if he'd be able to hold his own at that tackle spot, but I am very happy that the Falcons really invested a lot of money into their offensive line core, as they currently rank 3rd in offensive line spending. That's all I really got about it. If you're gonna run the ball a metric fuck ton, pay your offensive line because it was working, and you just drafted the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley. That should be a beautiful rushing attack. But how will the passing attack be has been a pretty big question, and will continue to be a pretty big question until we see Desmond Ridder take the field week 1. Now, I'm going to get a little outlandish for a second, because the fan discussion on whether or not the Falcons should have traded for Lamar Jackson, or kind of early in the draft process when Anthony Richardson was being mocked to the Falcons at 7, was not completely absurd. It was very unrealistic, but I get the idea of this team likes to run the ball. give him a rushing quarterback, considering we did not see a whole lot from Ridder in the 4 games that he played. But I was always in the camp of continue to build this thing. And if it does not work with Ridder, wait until the right quarterback to come in on a rookie contract to pick up the pieces, because they will have a plethora of weapons and an offensive line that is signed for years to come. I was very happy in free agency when the Falcons picked up Taylor Heinicke. That's just such a low-risk move, as Heinicke started 24 games for the Washington Commanders and football team over the last 2 years, and I watched some of the Commanders football team games. Yeah, he is a quarterback. He isn't bad. He isn't going to lose you the game, but he might not win you the game either. And luckily for him, just going back to the same thing, they have been drafting weapons, and securing that offensive line so he doesn't have to make the play. I don't think Heinicke will have to make the play. Actually, you know what? It just hit me. In one of the games versus the Falcons that Heinicke had, he made the play. Heinicke was making the plays. Maybe that's what just fucking tipped him off. They're like, yo, he made that throw to McLaurin for the touchdown. Sign him the moment we have the chance. But, back to actuality. Desmond Ridder is going to start week 1. At least I think he should. I don't know for sure. But I think he should. Kind of carrying momentum with a full offseason, hopefully as QB1 after starting 4 games. Because the Mariota experience just didn't work. But that's a whole different discussion. But yeah, Desmond Ridder, in the stuff that I watched, and I'm no expert of course, seems to have the potential of a pretty good game manager. And I think that's exactly what Taylor Heinicke is as well. And in a rush-first offense, that's sometimes all you need. Look at Jimmy Garoppolo and his time with the 49ers. He was fine, but he was a great game manager. If Desmond Ridder can get up to that level with Bijan Robinson on a 4-year rookie deal, I think that's all he really needs to be, as the Falcons may use him as a bridge quarterback, or he could be the long-term cheaper option if they do decide to pay big money to high upside guys like Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and Kyle Pitts. But to wrap a quick bow on the quarterback discussion, I didn't go deep at all. But I'm very happy that they didn't make that big trade up to pick one that the Panthers made. I like the way that Arthur Smith and co. just kind of stuck to their guns. I think the idea of betting on Desmond Ridder in a pretty pivotal year of your coaching tenure is interesting. I think that is interesting. But from a realistic standpoint, getting him and Taylor Heinicke is kind of best case scenario while loading up the rushing game, which is their bread and butter, the breadwinner, and the bread maker. Rushing game is everything for the Falcons, and they doubled down. Looking at the weapons the Falcons have and kind of the guys that they added this offseason, kicking off with the 2 big names that have been there, Kyle Pitts and Drake London. Their stats don't pop out at you, let's call it what it is. But Marcus Mariota was the QB last season. Of course the stats aren't going to pop out at you. If they can just be a great threat, and if the quarterback can put the ball where it needs to go some of the time, because these guys have the talent to get open, and the passing threat will not be the main concern for a defensive player or a defensive coach. They're not going to be a pass-first offense, but the passing game still needs to be a threat, and they invested a lot of draft capital into that, and they even invested a little bit of free agency money into that, signing Mac Hollins and Scotty Miller. I don't have a lot to say about that. I am kind of surprised they didn't at least spend a lottery ticket on a wide receiver. That was a little surprising to me, but they're not going to be a pass-first offense, so I do understand that. But yeah, that was my offense talk. I think Arthur Smith's going to do fucking great with Bijan Robinson. I cannot wait for that. And I'm excited to watch Desmond Ridder. So shifting over to the other 11, shifting over to the defensive side of the ball, they did a very good bit. Starting off up front, as the last 2 seasons, it has been Grady Jarrett versus the world, as the Falcons have ranked last in sacks per game over the last 2 seasons. So Finally, the Falcons had free agency money. They had $65 million, or they hovered around that number. I don't remember the exact amount. But they went out and they spent it, starting off with former Saints defensive tackle David Onyemata getting a 3-year, $35 million deal. And also former Saints edge rusher Caden Ellis getting a 3-year, $21.5 million deal. And they also beefed up with some veterans, getting D end Calais Campbell on the team for a 1-year, $7 million contract, and Bud Dupree on at a 1-year, $3 million deal. And let's start off with kind of the small potatoes. Let's start off with Bud Dupree and Calais Campbell. Looking at Bud Dupree, yeah, he fell off. After signing a 5-year, $82 million deal with the Tennessee Titans, he got cut 2 years into that contract. But looking at glass half full, his 9 QB hits last season would rank 4th on the 2022 Falcons, and he did not play a full season, only clocking in at 11 games. And shifting to Calais Campbell, 1-year, $7 million contract. He's a 36-year-old man. But looking at the glass half full, he had a pretty damn good 2022 season, recording 5.5 sacks, which is his most since 2019 and would rank 2nd on the 2022 Falcons. And he also recorded 14 QB hits, which is also his most since 2019 and would rank 2nd on the 2022 Falcons, and he did it in only 14 games. So these two signings are cheap, 1-year deals for veterans, but those two guys will be effective on the Falcons front, as yeah, it was terrible last year and they are upgrades. So let's move on to the longer contracts in David Onyemata and Caden Ellis, and them being signed can be attributed to Ryan Nielsen being hired as defensive coordinator. If you did not know, Nielsen was the co-defensive coordinator with the Saints last season and has been with that franchise as defensive line coach since 2017. So David Onyemata on a 3-year, $35 million contract, alongside Grady Jarrett, is one of the best defensive tackle combos for a 4-3 defense in the league, and it ought to be, considering $28.625 million of their cap space is being allocated to these two dudes. Onyemata has been a starter in every game he's played since 2019, recording double-digit QB hits in each of those seasons. And as Mr. Onyemata has kind of been the very consistent guy, has been around the league for some years now, Caden Ellis broke onto the scene just last season with 7 sacks in 2022 with only 11 games as a starter. And from week 10 on, when he started all but one game, Ellis recorded 5 sacks, 6 tackles for losses, 7 QB hits, and forced 2 fumbles. Ellis will instantly become a starter for this team, and hopefully his production will continue to tread upwards with Nielsen at the helm. I would be remiss to not mention 2022 second rounder Arnold Ebiketie, who I just watched some stuff on him. Guy's got burst. Falcons fans talk very highly on him. If you have any more notes, as I didn't watch a lot, if you have any notes on the guy, leave them in the comments. I do want to learn more about him and this pass rush in general, as that needs to be a legit threat. Now, I want to address the elephant in the room. About 15 minutes into the video, and if this one does well, I'm sure I would have already gotten comments on this video talking about Jalen Carter. So, I think he would have been a great draft pick to learn under Calais Campbell for one season and be alongside David Onyemata and Grady Jarrett for a few years. I think that would have been best for their pass rush. But I think the Bijan Robinson pick helps them win games sooner. And that's what Arthur Smith and the Falcons need right now, is that breakout season. I have no doubt that Jalen Carter would have been great for the Falcons and will be great for the Eagles, but I think Bijan Robinson fits better. But it's a win-win situation, and the fact that both of them were available at 8 is kind of fascinating. I also just want to touch on this for a second. I wonder if Tyree Wilson is there at 8 if they still go Bijan Robinson. Because that was the guy who I was rooting for to get picked by the Falcons, was Tyree Wilson. But didn't happen. He got picked at 7. That was a little draft opinion talk. But the Falcons did end up using a draft pick on an edge rusher in round 3, pick 75, selecting Ohio State defensive end Zach Harrison, who is a hyper-athletic guy who never shined at OSU. He was that example of dude's great in high school and has all the tools, just didn't put it together in college. And now with veteran leadership, hopefully he can put it together. And with Ryan Nielsen at the helm, hopefully him and Caden Ellis and Arnold Ebiketie can be a pretty damn good threesome. But that doesn't sound that appealing. But the potential is there for something very good to be built, as these guys all have very good potential. Now that was 3 minutes of kind of running in circles, let's talk about the secondary. Because as up front it was Grady Jarrett versus the world, back in the secondary it seemed to be AJ Terrell versus the world. As Terrell did have a statistical drop-off over the last 2 years, going from 3 picks to 0 and 16 PDs to 7. But looking at this chart by Pranav Rajaram, Terrell, according to advanced stats, which can either be great or very misleading, is still in the higher percentile of cornerbacks. I'm sure Falcons fans that have made it this far already know that. All right, I get it. I didn't watch that many Falcons games last year, so I was very curious. But with his output still being pretty damn good, the Falcons ranked 26th in opponent completion percentage in 2022 and 28th in that stat in 2021. So what did they do to upgrade their secondary this offseason? Once again, they had 64 mil in cap space, and they spent a good chunk of it on a flagship guy in Jesse Bates. 4 years, $64 million deal for a dude who has missed 1 game in his 5-year career with the Bengals and had 14 picks and 43 PDs in that stretch. It looks like the Falcons got another star in that secondary, and they didn't have to overpay to get him, as he ranks 6th in total contract value for safeties, 4th in AAV, and tied for 2nd in guaranteed money. Pretty damn fair market value deal for a team that greatly needed secondary help, and they got it in their flagship guy. Shifting over to the cornerback position, they acquired 3, 1 through trade, 1 through free agency, and 1 through the draft. Looking at the 2 former Detroit Lions cornerbacks they got, starting off with Jeff Okudah, as they would trade a 5th round pick for him just a few months back, which is a pretty damn fair deal. Okudah was a former number 3 pick, and it just didn't work out in Detroit, considering he had a year of Matt Patricia as his head coach. Then he tore his Achilles, so in his first real football season, he was pretty wishy-washy. I would say he still has potential. I think it's kind of unfair to instantly say he doesn't, but a change of scenery was definitely needed for his career. Let's face it, he's not going to live up to number 3 pick, duh. But if he can be a pretty damn serviceable cornerback too, across from AJ Terrell, that would be great. Looking at the other Lions cornerback they got, signing Mike Hughes to a 2-year deal that could really be a 1-year contract. I looked at the details. His dead cap in 2024 is $750,000. If it doesn't work out this year, you can cut him. But Mike Hughes seems to be a nickel option for the Falcons alongside Terrell and Okudah, but they seem to have drafted some competition for that spot, as at round 4, pick 113, the Falcons selected Utah cornerback Clark Phillips III, who is on the very small side at 5'9", 184 pounds, but had 6 picks last season and showed fantastic ball skills. I think this kid can be something very good. If he was normal cornerback size, dude, he would have been a 1st or 2nd round pick. Problem is, he isn't normal cornerback size. Something that's good for him, though, besides Mike Evans, this division doesn't have great receivers. If Michael Thomas plays, but he hasn't played football in like 3 seasons, so who knows if that happens. But besides Mike Evans, there aren't really great tall receivers for that to be a great concern. I think this is a great nickel option long term. I personally love the pick. So looking at the defense in total, the Falcons spent a lot of their money on it, and rightfully so. They got a flagship guy in Jesse Bates. They got some cornerback help for A.J. Terrell. Nothing that really pops out at you, but can really be a great supporting cast for the star. And up front, they spent a decent bit too. Only 2 long-term contracts though, and a pretty high upside draft pick. I think they undeniably got upgrades at that position, but their pass rush won't be a great threat unless Zach Harrison bursts onto the scene. Shifting over to the offense, Bijan Robinson. I will say it a million times this video. I love it, I love it, I love it. I love it. I understand positional value debate, but the Falcons run the ball, they hammer the rock. Bijan Robinson is perfect for that. And they kept their offensive line together, signing Chris Lindstrom to a monstrous contract and Caleb McGarry to an over $10 million per year deal, while drafting Matthew Bergeron just to upgrade that rushing offense even more. Once again, the passing offense, Desmond Ridder may not be the guy, but he doesn't have to be the guy. And if he isn't the guy, Taylor Heineke can be a pretty damn serviceable starting quarterback for the Falcons as they look to make a playoff push in Arthur Smith's 3rd year as head coach. Once again, not a make or break season, but this year could make them. Or if it's disastrous, it could break them. I love what the Falcons did this offseason. I personally think they should win the division. They're my favorite to do it. I don't know what Vegas thinks about that, but I think the Falcons do win the division this year as Bijan Robinson is just hand in glove, no O.J. Simpson, baby.